Alrighty, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming here on this absolutely gorgeous Southland day. You can see from the west coast, I'm not quite used to this sort of temperature, but I should expect it when I come to Southland, Invercargill or Gore. My name's Andy Thompson, and I'm going to moderate this discussion. We're going to have on local government reorganisation. So I'm the host of I used to host the Muster back in the day, and now I've gone to a new outfit, Countrywide Media, with Sarah Perring, and we've got a new show appearing in a couple of, in about a month's time, Countrywide Connect. So you'll be starting to see a bit of info about that. But enough about me. I've got a fantastic panel here today to talk about this this big issue, obviously in the Southland district, and just want to welcome our online audience as well. So really appreciate you guys for tuning in. There will be the ability to take some questions. So on the panel, first of all, we've got Jeremy McPhail. He is the chair of Environment Southland. So Jeremy, thank you very much. Jeff Grant is from Thriving Southland, well known to all of you. Ben Bell, who is the mayor of the Gore District Council, also owner of a very good hat, and Jason Herrick, president of Southland Federated Farmers. So welcome to everyone, and thank you to everyone who's made the time to come into this tent here in Environment Southland today. As you know, there is big moves from the government that was announced late last year, local government reorganisation. At the same time, or slightly before that, the councils of the Southland region, regional councils, Southland region, called in the Local Government Commission to have a look at reorganisation of the local governance here in the Southland region. So that's what we're here to talk about. I know there's a little bit of confusion about this process, but we're just going to start with a few questions for the panellists, and then we're going to open up the floor for the final part of the discussion. Now, I just want to make it really, really clear that when we do open up the floor, it is for questions. Okay, I'm going to be really strict on this. I don't want statements and I don't want opinion, and I will shut you down if you do that. Okay, so genuine questions. If you've come here to have a big spiel and make a statement that everyone can listen to, go somewhere else. Not interested. We're here to learn and to have questions answered. So just going to make that real clear from the start. All right, let's get into it. First thing, I'm going to ask the panellists. Now, they don't all have to answer. They can if they want. This is going to be quite loose on this one. But first question, lessons from the past. Do you think the structure we've had since 1989 still works for Southland? If not, what's changed? Who wants to take it?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. The short answer is that no, it's not working. Current trajectory for a lot of our councils is huge debt and more debt, rate rises through the roof. Current trajectory for rate rises, our poor pensioners won't be able to afford to pay their rates by 2035. There's a clear answer in itself. We've got too much duplication going on. It's just clearly not working. We can't carry on in the same. Definition is stupid. Carry on doing the same thing and expect a different result.
Yeah, yes, I agree. We've moved on a lot in the last 40 years, and I think the pressure is also the legislation, what we're getting told to do from central government is just so involved and so much more work, but we're all doing the same stuff too. So yeah, look, some of the costs involved, it just makes sense that hey, we've got to have a good look at the system and work out what something's going to be for the future. But a lot of the pressure is coming from central government making us do this stuff too. So.
Look, I've worked with local government organisations for about 20 years in strategy and governance around the country. My impression is that if you look at any structural governance role, about every 20 years you should turn them over, because they do get locked into a particular way they operate. I don't blame local government itself per se, because the variations between lack of investment in terms of assets through to central government requirements onto local government that probably exceed the rateability of the area. So for that reason, it's a mix of reasons why we've got to this point. I do find it really interesting when people argue for amalgamation and get it bigger. You look at the UK, there are 65 million people, 100 councils, so each council represents 6.5 million people. They bitch and moan about the lack of connection within their local authorities. I'm sure if you went to Auckland, you wouldn't find that many people who would say that they're better now than they were prior to amalgamation. So I think we have to be careful about what we do in terms of restructure, but the important part about it is what we should be doing is thinking about what's best for Southland, not the rest of the country, for the next 15 to 20 years. We should start from that point rather than starting from a point of saying we should have one or two, we should have a unitary authority. We have to actually decide what do we want to achieve out of local government over the next 15, 20 years, and then look at what structure you would put in.
Yeah, I think everything's been covered relatively well. I think the points that have been made around high rate increases, high debt are definitely an issue. Will structure fix that? I'm not entirely sure, but I do think that having the conversation about can we do things better, can we share resources better, can we get those economies of scale in a different manner? You know, the work that we're doing with Central Otago and Clutha on waters, that's a different way of thinking to get that economies of scale. So whether amalgamation's the right answer, what size and shape that looks like, I'm not entirely sure, but it's great that we're having these conversations.
That leads into what I was going to ask next, and maybe I'm going to start with you again on this one, Ben. Just, is it the way then that councils are set up? Is that getting in the way of them working together, or is it more about initiatives not working?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of that, right? You know, at the end of the day, mayors and councillors are elected to represent their district. We're meant to try and protect and endorse and make prosper our particular areas. So to then throw in alternative concepts like trying to make, you know, Southland District or Clutha District more prosperous as well is quite a difficult concept. And then you've got, you know, regional councils and TAs doing, you know, some similar jobs as well. You've got a regulator and then an applicant in that scenario. So there could be some duplications there. Again, how do you get around some of those structural issues? I don't have all the answers, but it's definitely something we need to be thinking about.
The way it's set up? Okay. Okay. What about then the national policy changes, not previous to, I guess, what the government has done recently? Has that made it harder for councils to work together?
Look, I think this is a classic asking turkeys to vote for Christmas. The concept of asking territorial mayors to sit down in a collective group and decide what the future structure of a province is going to be seems to me to be a crazy way to go about it. I'm a fan to say that some of the aspects of local government are archaic. No disrespect to Ben, but the thought of actually electing a mayor seems to have been something that should have been left at 1800, not now. I'm a bit of fan of shared services, and on the basis of that, I think there are some quite variations of structures that don't exist currently in New Zealand that would work better.
Just listening to yourself, I almost forgot the question.
National policy changes made it policy changes made it harder for councils to work together.
Yeah, I think yes. I suppose we're all doing our own thing, but some of these decisions now, when they're doing some policy changes now, they're almost taking away the ability for us to work together. They're sort of overriding. We're trying to do it locally, trying to sort some of this mess out, and they're coming and then putting their fingers in and saying, well, we'll take that bit away, especially from a regional council perspective at the moment. So, but luckily we've got a local process going on at the moment. We're all still in the room, and I think that's hugely important for us to bring that experience, the regional side, or the environmental side, into the discussion.
One of the biggest challenges we face from, a province like the Southland that does punch well above its weight is we've got our bureaucrats that hide behind national policy unless we have a local rule that benefits them more. And I'll talk about the RMA. Every one of our councils hide behind the RMA in a lot of respect, in a lot of sense, and don't actually do what's right or use common sense for the local situation. And to be honest, this sort of stuff has got to stop. Transparency has got to be more in the public eye, and we've got to be more transparent about what our councils are doing. And so, one size doesn't fit all. There's no two ways about that. And everyone is afraid of change, but in this instance, change needs to happen regardless, because we can't keep beating the same drum. But you did right, Andy. Central government doesn't make it easier for the councils to work together, hence the duplication. And I'll use an example of that just recently that farmers really struggle with. All right, we need to go to 2 different councils to get a consent across the line for a building. All right, one council signs off on it, the other one doesn't, and ends it up in a public hearing. It's dramatic cost and huge cost to the person applying for the consent. That sort of stuff's got to stop. Like it is absolutely stifling our economy. Absolutely stifling our economy. We could do much better having that local investment straight back into our local communities.
Well, that actually leads into the next question, Jason. And people often say they're confused about which council does what. Is the current system making things harder for the public?
I've just been involved in a project in Central Otago. It took us 9 months to get the consent and 6 weeks to build. So it does slow you down a bit. Look, and building's a good example, and similar. Rivers don't know any boundaries either, and so on that basis, I think you have to really think about the way you do those. And as I said before, you've got to think about what do you want to put that is centralised for the whole of Southland, and what do you want to localise, and it's a pretty simple process in that sense. You could do it this way. You could split Southland into 3, and on the basis of that, you'd have 3 elected from each, gives you 9. They become the unitary authority. They elect a chair for the board, and they operate for the whole of the province. They do the water, the transport, the environmental regulation stuff, and then you split the other 3, and you have what you call operational governance for each of those 3 regions. So you want to put it in a way, your central Wimbercarg will be 135,000, the lower half of Southland would be the second one, the top half of Southland would be the third. You have an elected boards for each of those, and they are responsible for the rateable part of the budget for that, and then they buy the services. This is fixing Jason's problem he has with bureaucrats. They buy the services off the central institution that's based for the whole of the province, and that's the quickest way to do it. There are a whole lot of models like that. Australia's got some quite good ones. You go into Europe, especially in the Nordic countries, they have some quite smart ones as well. But you've got to get it in a way where you have decided what are the central roles and what do you want to leave back in a local governance aspect in the province.
That sounds like a submission for the Local Government Commission, in a nutshell.
You sound like you're all sorted, Jeff. Just to go back to Jason's comment, look, I don't always disagree with you in regards to obviously regulatory side of things and consenting. I do understand we need simplified, and there is confusion sometimes. What does each council do? And in that respect, but the reality is we have actually had a fully regulated dairy industry in Southland for probably 25 years. We're the first province to have consents for dairy, and I wouldn't say we're exactly stifling the economy. It's booming. Southland is booming from an agricultural perspective under a regulatory framework. So I'd have to, I do disagree that, there's lots going on in Southland which is working under the current rules. I know there are situations, one-off in bits and pieces. There's some major consent concerns, but you got to have a bit of a broader view of it in regards to this, and but getting better structures into place to allow progress, but more permitted activities with conditions and things. The enabling is hugely important, and that hopefully, if there's a better structure in the future, that can be absorbed. But I'll disagree with anybody that says where Southland has been held back.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jeremy. I mean, we've all got to agree to disagree, right? And but I sort of find that kind of confusing, considering the money that it does cost for consenting in these public hearings and processes. That if that wasn't spent, would the economy be better off? I would argue to say yes, it would, because there would be more money going into the local communities. No two ways about it. And instead, it's going into a bureaucratic pocket. So
All right. I guess that leads into another part, and it's democracy. And so if we cut down on duplicated processes, does that mean fewer local decision-making points? Does that mean an erosion of democracy and choice for the constituents, for the ratepayers?
Well, I guess it's the key way up when you're talking about amalgamation, right? Is that amalgamation leads to less voice for the public in essence, because you're taking, if we're looking at the current proposal, you're taking away the council, that would be the Gore Council, and merging it into one. So you take away a lot of that voice. But if there are cost benefits in that, then that's something that we have to weigh up as a community. The thing is that we don't have a lot of that financial modelling at the moment. We don't know what those savings would actually be. So it is going to be that question that the community have got to answer, is what would you pay or what would you save for losing that voice and that direct connectiveness with your local elected members.
You've also got to ask the question, of things of the past, would they work now? Where we once upon a time used to have catchment boards, could that be our community voice? We've got a catchment system here that's working really well through Thriving Southland. Could that not be implemented into our local government system and have a catchment boards back where that community voice is coming from the grassroots up? And that's the most important thing here. It's got to come from the communities, from grassroots up. We've got to stop with this top-down approach. Okay, we as a community can lead this. We've got the opportunity to lead it, and we need to lead it. And by having conversations, having all ideas on the table, have got to be paramount in this. So that's where democracy is.
Sounds like another submission to the Local Government Commission.
I was just going to say, not right.
The community voice is everything in regards to this, and I know that SDC work on community boards around South and providing feedback into councils. I don't know whether one thing we do not want is central government deciding our future, and we've got to. I think we probably all agree to that, because ultimately, when they do make decisions, it doesn't always. We sometimes are scratching our head where the hell that came from, or how is that going to work? So this is where it's so important, this process we're in, to really get this nutted out, and we really need to have a very single voice telling the government, let us sort this out locally, because ultimately it will be the community who will make the decision on this. And one, I think it will be, if we get a structure, there will be good representation and the voices heard if we get it right.
People get a bit sort of stuck on this, and they think that the governance is actually a real cost to your rates. And when you look at it as a proportion of rates, it's minimal, often less than about 2 or 3%. Look, I'd work on the principle of saying centralise your operation and localise your democracy is the best way to go.
All right. I want to talk about fairness then. So local government reorganisation, whatever we do, how do we make sure then that the whole region is treated fairly? Some areas have higher needs. Some bring in more funding through larger rate-paying populations. How do we balance that up?
That's why I sort of question the one council amalgamation in Southland, where you've got rural that contributes a heck of a lot to the GDP, right? Well, it's the majority of it, right? If you have one council, the risk is all of the rural funding going to end up and we're going to have a glorified city and a very lacklustre rural sector, or rural roads or rural townships? There's that risk, an element of risk there. So you've got to have that conversation. Are we better off with two unitaries? So we don't run that risk. We have a rural unitary, we have a city unitary. So that conversation is definitely on the table.
Fairness is something that we always grapple with around councils when they're setting rates and trying to work all this out. It's hugely difficult because we feel like there's winners and losers, but we've got to look a bit further above looking down on this and go. For me, I'm a Southlander. We're all in this together. If we start, we have heard the rural-urban divide. Look, basically Southland is based on agriculture and Tiwai from an income point of view. Invercargill is one of the most, well, it probably is the most rural city in New Zealand, and they know that it's hugely important, the connections into the rural area. I personally, I think that we've got to get over this. We've got to move on, and ultimately that whatever structures are looking ahead, wherever we come out, we cannot be saying, oh, we have one group and we have another group. We're only 100,000 people, 50,000 ratepayers, 30-odd thousand people pay those rates. And when you're talking about 6.5 million people for one council, we've got bugger all people here to pay the bills. And if we start splitting and doing that, to be honest, it just doesn't make sense for me. But but fairness, it is still a thing. We need each other. That's the story.
Can you repeat the question again?
Yep. Which one was it? This one here, fairness, yeah. How do we make sure the whole region is treated fairly when some areas have higher needs, but others bring in more funding through a higher rate-paying population?
Yeah, I guess fairness is really tricky, right, up and down the country. When you look at this district in particular, we're quite a small district, but we service a really large area. So when we're talking about fairness, there's always an argument that's run that, you know, we have a pool, a library, an ice skating rink that services a much larger area than the people who are actually paying for it. So I think that's a little bit of giving back to New Zealand Inc., Southland Inc. You know, that's part of it all. So how you balance that up, I'm not entirely sure. I think Jeremy's made a good point though around, you know, population size. If we're talking about 2 unitaries, which is on the table, you're looking at amalgamating a 13,000 population to a 35, which is, you know, the savings that you're going to get there, as mentioned before. The governance board for us is 1% of your rates. It's not a massive amount of savings. Another interesting point that's raised from the fairness part, though, as well, is these CTB boards that are being established to replace the regional councils. The current voting structure is based on population. So when you take into the population of both Gore and Southland, we will get, even if we both vote against something, Invercargill will have enough votes to overturn that, just purely based on population. So we're going to have to fight pretty hard to make sure the voting rights are correct on that CTB.
Thanks, Ben. I want to have a look at some opportunities for the future. I'm going to sort of put this next question into next two questions together. How could Southland benefit from a more integrated local government structure? What would be the most immediate gains? And will decisions actually get any faster if that happens? You want to have a crack at that?
I'll give it a go. It's an interesting one. The opportunities, look, whatever transition to whatever we go to, it's going to take time. So it's going to be costly. It's going to be take time, and you should take time to make sure we get this right. The opportunities, I suppose, there's clarity. There's for people to say, well, okay, we've got a better thing coming ahead of us. There'll be clarity around who does what. There'll be one-stop shop or a two-stop shop or whatever structure we have. But need to look at, probably need to talk it down a bit if they're thinking that everybody's going to think their rates are going to go down or, this is going to save the nation doing this, because it won't. It may provide better service in the near future of how we do things if there's efficiencies in it with roading, Three Waters or whatever it is. But look, it's going to take time, and I'm just cautioned about how this will play out.
I think in Southland's perspective, there's an argument to centralise some of the services. So if you took consents, that's both land consents and also building, water, transport, roading. There's probably a good argument to centralise all of that. And then if you looked at across the 3 territorials and 1 regional council, unless you were going to get a 20, being blunt here, but unless you were going to get about a 20 or 30% reduction in staff costs, you're not really gaining. So you have to do that sort of volume. people say it's impossible and it's hard and it's always difficult. You're better to do it at the front end, get it done, and then rebuild your business. In that sense, I don't think it's that hard. The attraction to doing that and around those sort of infrastructure things is that you get the right type of people. You can attract, because of scale, the right sort of people to come to Southland and provide that advice. So that's my argument. The rest of the stuff you can localise. You can turn it to the Te Anau board and they can, it's 40% of their rates. They decide what they're going to do in their street. They can go back and contract those services out of that central body if you want to. I mean, there are a whole mix of models you could do quite easily that still localises that democracy.
Oh.
Cheers. I agree with Jeff in a sense that we do have to look at centralising some things, transport and roading being one of them. We only get 54% of our money back that we actually put into it. But you've got to ask the question on the other side of the coin: will we end up looking after Auckland and Wellington a lot better than we get down here? Would they give us the attention that we actually need? So there's a lot of those discussions to be had. There's a lot of negatives in it and there's a lot of positives in it. All right, so definitely support that conversation. But we still need that local voice down here. It still needs to be led from grassroots. That has got to be an absolute paramount key in this, right? It's got to be a strategy point in there that it needs to be led from the local voice, from the grassroots up. That's got to be bantered over and over and over again. We can't keep letting bureaucrats and Wellington make the decisions for us.
Yeah, I mean, all of those things can be streamlined now. We can combine roading contracts, we can combine water services, we can combine those things without full-blown amalgamation. Why aren't we doing that? That's a great question. I mean, we're trying on waters. We're trying it at the moment with our roading contract as well. We're open to working with other people, but it's that thing of we're all elected for our own areas, so sometimes that conversation seems to be a lot more difficult than we'd like. You talked about opportunities. I know there's been a lot that have been spoken about throughout since this was first brought up, streamlining things, better voice for Southland. To be brutally honest, that's all fluff. If this isn't financial, if the opportunity isn't financial, then there's no point doing this. Exactly what Jason was talking about at the beginning. If there's not an opportunity to reduce debt or to stop rate increases being so high, then we may as well just boxing on as we are, because if we're going to spend a whole lot of money amalgamating for no financial gain, then there's not really a whole lot of point.
Just to reiterate what Ben said. Tomorrow we could be doing shared services. We don't need legislation change or anything. Unfortunately, this is the problem, that people are still looking after their own areas. And we could do all this not amalgamation, but actually the engine room could be run as one. And that can be done tomorrow. But it's a political decision and things like that. And we've got a process going, but we could actually be already moving into this scenario. So it should be on the table too.
All right, I'm going to ask one more question and then we'll take some questions from the floor. Environment. Southland produces a huge amount for the country, but it also has environmental pressures. How do we balance those things? How do we make sure the environment doesn't take a back seat if councils become more integrated? Oh, yeah. Is that what we call you?
Absolutely, that's why you got me. No, you got me here to control me. But anyway, rather than me being and asking questions, we already are looking after the environment. Like, you look at the amount of work that farmers are doing out there in the rural sector and the amount that they're actually contributing to the environment. Richard and I were talking about it earlier. There's a lot of guys out and gals out there doing some marvellous, tremendous work looking out for the environment. We're already doing it. We've got to install trust back into our people, because legislation and regulation has taken trust away from us. And I'll use a real prime example of this, Andy. Like, I interviewed a young fella not long ago, and when I got to the health and safety sector of the interview, he said to me straight up, I've been told that health and safety will look after me. I don't need to think for myself. That, to me, was appalling, and that's the system that we're currently running in. We've got to put trust back in our people when it comes to the environment.
Putting a political hat on, I'd agree. There's a huge amount being done in the farming sector, and we need to keep on doing that. We do have issues, and they won't go away no matter what the government does. And as a province, it's critical to manage our environment because we're in a lucky place that we can probably sort out some of these issues reasonably smartly. Probably from the politics side of things, as I said, certainly keeping the regional council in the room, us as governors, which the government want to kick us out. So we make sure that's our department around protecting the environment and trying to balance up the economy and the community's needs when it comes to looking around that environmental freshwater and bits and pieces like that. So it will be critically important to make sure you got the right people in the room to make sure that that part of the discussion is held up front too.
I think the first thing we should acknowledge is that it's not all just to do with farming. There's effluent ponds and sewerage schemes, etc. around. There are consents that allow for pollutants to go in rivers that have nothing to do with farming. So there are a range of things that have an impact on the environment that are not just in the farming circle. The second thing is that I think you have to be very careful to start splitting this up. As I said before, rivers don't know boundaries, and I think there's probably a stronger argument to centralise in terms of environmental consent processes. For those who argue for unitary councils, and there's some merit in them, I'd ask you to go and have a look at how the regulator versus the delivery agency and the 4 or 5 unitary authorities around New Zealand currently operate. I don't think you'll find somebody telling you they're better than some of the other structures.
Okay, there's just one more question, and we'll get a quick answer from all 4 of you on this one, and then we'll go to the floor. Talking about Southland Inc., right, the province, would a unified structure give Southland a stronger voice nationally? And what would be the biggest benefit?
I have to agree, it probably would give us a stronger voice because currently we have 4 councils arguing against one another to central with different ideas. So having one unified voice, and that's where democracy comes into it. You know, democracy around the table, the decisions made. We've got one voice going to Parliament, but you know that argument can be used both ways.
Yeah, I'll argue the other way. If we've got 4 mayors and a chair all singing the same song, then that's far more powerful than one in Wellington.
My experience has been over the years, and you know we lost a bit of an icon in Sir Tim, but my experience has been that Southland has collectively always been very smart, predominantly in Wellington. I haven't seen many examples where we have seen either the mayors or the chair of the regional council collectively do anything other than argue for the best interests of Southland. They might scrap amongst themselves down here, but my experiences have been pretty good at presenting Southland very well in comparison to some other provinces. Like Otago.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Correct.
yeah. Look, the government would probably they're always saying, "Oh, we just want to talk to one people. We don't want to talk to a lot of different ones." But I think at Southland here we've got a pretty united voice if we're in regard to having mayors and that. So we should be pretty united when we come to Southland Inc. And I think they recognise that. And also, I know Otago. You mentioned Otago. There are different committees that go up over South Island entity and talking to Wellington too. So I think you've got all the mayors in there talking as one. It's pretty powerful.
Alrighty, thanks guys. Really do appreciate that. Right, let's have some questions from the floor. First, yes.
Peter McDonald, just asking a question. Have we got a context first, if I could?
Really quick context.
Very context.
I'll tell you when you're done.
Yeah, thanks Andy for that. The regional councils post-89 were left with significant assets, community assets across this country. Southland, I don't have to tell Jeremy what assets the environment Southland hold, but they are significant. Southport, the investment fund, goes on and on. Do any of your panellists see the immediate risk around those assets and the decision making around those assets during a transition phase And furthermore to that, who would be the decision maker if there's governance as a head? Who's going to be the decision maker on those really significant?
All right, so talking about assets, who would be the decision maker in government reorganisation for where those assets would go?
Look, there are only two major assets, the Invercargill Airport and Southport. Right? If you look at the rate size, and they're the two big ones that have some value, I'd do the same with them in terms of water, consenting and everything. I'd centralise those for the whole of the province.
I know we've had this discussion around the future for those, but people need to understand that Southport's a strategic investment for the Southland economy. And if anybody thought about, and to be honest, we are selling down a bit. We've got looking at that. We've asked the community about that, but we'll still hold a majority share. So it's strategic to Southland. So I think hopefully that everybody else will understand that, and leadership when whatever it goes into. But it is a community asset. These are community assets that are critical to Southland. So if we start selling off those, it's a bit of a sad day, I'd say.
I think it becomes a bit of a lolly scramble, right? I think I read in Dunedin that they're trying to get their hands on the port before it goes out to everybody else. It will probably be the same down here. Again, coming back to the CTB argument about voting rights versus population, that gives Invercargill the voting rights to push it into their kitty. So that's something we have to sort out before that transition happens.
Yeah, agreed. It needs to stay in the ownership of the people of the community, and whether or not it gets set up in its own entity and own board, and that money disperses into the community separately, there's another discussion that can be had. You can keep them separate and under their own board control, like most companies do. And I'm sure they've got a current board that sits there and helps make the decision before it comes back to the council.
All right, we've got a question online. I think Sam's got it.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I had a couple of questions come through on our live stream. The first one's a simple process one that I can clear up. Jess asks, if the commissioners say it's going to be a regional amalgamation and councils vote yes for it, will we still go to a referendum? Well, the answer is that doesn't matter what the councils say. It's about going to a poll. It'll go to a poll. The whole community will get a chance, and if 51% of the population are in favour, then that will go through. Of the vote. Yeah. Of the vote of the people. It's not. It used to be per district, but now it's across the whole of Southland.
Can I just add some context to that one as well?
Okay.
Really quickly. So this is where it gets a little bit confusing. So that's based off of the current reorganisation proposal that the Local Government Commission is looking into. So that's all assuming that referendum happens prior to the 1st of July 2027. Should that happen or not, after the 1st of July 2027, that requirement for a referendum based on the current legislation proposal will no longer be needed. So it's up to the minister to decide whether that is the option to go with or not. So this is where Jeremy's point around we need to decide our own future before government makes it for us. I mean, at the end of the day, they could just make it for us anyway.
And now the other question that's just come through. What are the thoughts of the panel on amalgamation with Southland, Gore and Clutha?
So I personally believe, and it's definitely coming from the rural sector, a lot of people that I talk to, especially around the Gore district, that we do need to look at the boundaries. When you've got Gore in here that services right up to the Blue Mountains, Waipahi, down to the Catlins, all come this way. So I definitely think we need to have a conversation about where the actual true boundaries lie. Have the ratepayers paying rates to actually where they're getting their services from, I think is super key. All right, and we need to have those conversations need to be on the table as well.
Just to give you some statistics in regards to this, that basically there's 60,000 people living in Invercargill. There's actually 60,000 live in South and Gore and Clutha, all of Clutha. So you understand the dynamics of that. Huge areas with sort of low population. So, yeah, there is a bit of discussion around that, but there's no reason why if we didn't have structures that we, again, the shared services across borders. We understand in Gore. I live on the boundary of Otago South, and then, you know, Bryce here, he's my neighbour basically, but totally different set of rules and games over there. So it doesn't make sense for that. We need to have some consistency over there. But yeah, no, it's an interesting discussion. It should be had.
Yeah, I think it's already been said, but definitely needs to be part of the discussion. The Gore district is obviously in a really awkward position of we're sharing our waters with Central Otago and Clutha, and then we're potentially sharing a regional council with Invercargill and Southland. So really puts us in an awkward position.
So just on that, then, with the local government reform that's happening, the local government commission, is it possible, are boundary changes or district boundary changes, are they actually on the table under the current structure of these that can happen?
You can do anything. You can put to the commission anything you like, whether they actually get out the other end or not. I mean, you know, again, I'd say the boundaries are a bit archaic. Why we suddenly think when you're driving, is it Clinton or somewhere, you're suddenly gone into another province? I don't notice the difference personally, but apparently we are. I mean, so for that reason, I come back to the issue of saying you need to decide what you want to get out of the system, and then look at the structure that would fit best for that. And if it includes Clutha, good on you.
Yeah, but the local government commission has been asked to have a look at Southland region, right?
I think it's going to be
Don't they have to ask the people of Clutha what they want?
No, there is a bit of broader. They can look at associated or parties and neighbours and things that will be affected by it. So I think that would indicate they need to look around, or if there's an option, they need to have a look at it.
Yeah, in the interest of democracy, I'm not a big fan of having one option taken to a referendum. I think we need multiple options for people to vote on, and then whack the bottom one off and then vote again until you get the right one that people actually want. I knew you were going to say that.
Not touching that with a 10-foot pole. So I just wanted to clear up again. So this is where it is again confusing. So with the local government commission investigation, which we're currently under, they have been asked explicitly by Southland and Invercargill to not investigate Otago Council. So they've taken that under provision, so it'll only be investigating Southland. Now, if we look at the overall reorganising that government is proposing, everything's on the table. And ministers have been asked on numerous occasions whether jumping regional boundaries or expanding outside of them is a requirement, and they said anything's on the table. So, again, two different processes.
Okay. Any more questions from the floor?
So I'm not going to ask about amalgamation, but my question is for Jason. So you talked about transparency and councils needing to be more transparent. My question is, what beyond annual plans, long-term plans, community engagement, community boards, public engagement, open public engagement in council meetings, what more can councils do to be transparent with communities?
To be honest with you, be honest when you're asked a question. Simple. Because we do know that we're not always getting honest answers back.
Hold on, clarify that. From who? What? Explain.
I mean, when organisations are asked a question, be honest and actually give the facts and data that is required, you know, and the ones that are actually true, not an opinion. Right? We quite often see a lot of our decisions being made on modelling and predictions. I want to see real life, actual factual data before those decisions are made. We're running our lives on people's predictions and modelling. It's quite often coming up in district plans especially. And since I come into this position as the Feds president, I've read all the district plans, and to be honest with you, I honestly think all our planners live on a different planet. Seriously. Because none of it makes sense. Or a lot of it doesn't make sense.
Going to add in regards to meeting, you know, to back up what you're saying, that we certainly over the last few years, all their workshops are live streamed. So there's nothing behind closed doors in regards to councillors talking. There was a bit of discussion about that. Some councillors were saying, I might not be able to voice my opinion properly, but I think everybody's pretty relaxed about it because you go, well, look, we've got nothing to hide in regards to that. Now, that's around council and things, but that's all I'd like to say on that.
I'd just like to add to that, Jeremy, that you can't say that conversations aren't happening behind closed doors, because they do.
Right, question.
A lot of people out there are pretty excited about amalgamation because they think it's going to be the demise of Environment Southland. So can you tell us, starting with you, Jeremy, maybe, what will come out of Environment Southland, what aspects of Environment Southland will go into an amalgamation concept? For starters, the board will probably disappear as it is at the moment, but what would you expect to take with you?
As I was sort of saying there before, I said, look, the work that Environment Southland does today will still carry on. It'll be under a different, if there's amalgamation. I'll back the regional council. We do something different. We deal with the environment. We're dealing with regulating in the TAs. We do a different job. If anybody thinks that that's going to stop, they're dreaming. It will get amalgamated into if that's what the community wants. And I really back, we do not want to stop doing that stuff. We do not want to go backwards. We've done so much, we're going, and the rural or towns, Three Waters is going to be happening. That will sort some of these issues out. And ultimately it will make our future or our next generations hopefully a lot easier to work in. When people go, how's it going to be streamlined? You go, well, there's still going to be river management, still going to be biodiversity, biosecurity. We're still going to look after the coast, the air, and water, And this is where, going back to, trying to work out what is the problem here. Are we trying to solve a problem that's not there? Trying to understand, is this actually going to save money? Kicking councils, less councils. I've got to question some of those things. We want to make sure we're not making a problem that we're trying to solve, like wasting time on this too. But the thing is, the question's been posed, let's answer it and see what comes out of it. So, and that's where hopefully the community, the numbers, and all these things will come into play. But I'll leave it there.
Look, the first thing you have to understand is, from my perspective, the RMA, since it was introduced back in about 1980s, 88, 89, has had several iterations by several governments. And so, and so what's crept into the system is no fault of any individual in terms of the work they do. But a classic example is, on building consents now, building inspectors don't sign things off. You have to get an engineer or a electrician to sign off their work, and if you have to go and if they're not happy, they can get a peer review. So it just becomes an endless circle. The same on resource consent. We've now got where middle management, no fault of their own, are making sure they've checked every aspect of that resource consent, and so it drags on and on. As I said before, 8 to 9 months to get a consent, put up 3 glamping tents that took 6 weeks to put up. Got an engineer's report 140 pages long to check how to bolt the tents down onto the decking. I mean, it's just gone nuts. And so you have to say that's what we're looking for in the RMA reforms, Damien and team, both sides, is to make sure, yes, we protect the environment, we allow business to grow, but at the same time we don't slow progress. And they're the fundamental things we've got to make sure we get right.
It's not about getting rid of regional council, in my opinion. Okay, it's about getting rid of duplication, because all the councils are reaching into the environment space. All the councils are doing their own work around climate change and all the other narratives that go with it. Right? So, are we duplicating too much? Yes, we are. Okay, it's about duplication. It's not about getting rid of regional council. We're still going to need the environment space. There's no two ways about it. It's how that ends up is, to be honest, is up to us. It's up to us as people, as the Southland community, to make that decision, not let central government decide it for us.
In regards, the government's come out and indicated, there's going to be 47% less consent. Now, from a regional aspect, on the environmental, we think might be 20%. Most of the consents are about like building a deck on your house and things like that, the simple things. So just understand, everybody thinks, half the consents are going. It's a load of bollocks, to put it nicely. So just, this is again about saying, they're going to strip the regional council and getting rid of the governors and that. The job will carry on. You just can't. There'll be streamlining, efficiencies in it, but the base there will always carry on, and it's hugely important.
Thanks. Next online question is for Jason. Do you have any suggestions of practical solutions?
That's an extremely open question. I'm backing that. I'm picking that's come from a council staff member, possibly. I know. Yeah. Oh, cool. That's cool. Do I have any practical suggestions? Well, yes, I do. Okay. We've got a huge issue in this province around bridges and roading. Okay. A lot of wasted money. You take into account how many long-term plans do we have, and how much money do those long-term plans take? Take the Water and Land Plan, for instance, over the last 10 years. How much does that cost the Southland economy? Right, 16 million. How many bridges around Southland will that repair? We've got 3,000 kilometres of extra travel going on roads because they can't cross bridges around Southland. That's a lot annually, right? We've got a huge issue in this province, large roading network. If we can chase efficiencies and chase savings across the board, we should blimmin' well do it, because right now we are going backwards at a fast rate of knots in the roading infrastructure. So that's just one example.
David?
Yeah, look, this local government commission thing is going to take years to actually happen. Jeff said it before, and I've heard inklings. It's a shame we didn't have ICC and SDC here as well, but I guess my things around the shared services, things like roading and that, we can do it, and we need to be working on that rather than waiting years to end up with something. Surely we can do something now for the ratepayer that helps keep rates down, get some of these efficiencies. It makes common sense to take us all forward, because I guess I was just looking for a sign-off from the various councils that they are prepared to look at it in a way that they haven't previously and go forward, so that we don't have to wait for the new model to start making these efficiencies.
Yeah, so shared services sign up. We have spoken about this earlier. I think the councils have indicated that they'd like to be able to do it, but there's issues with that, Ben?
It's just other people willing to work with other people, right? I can give you assurance that we're obviously working with others on waters, and we're looking at widening that out further as well. We're looking at redoing our roading contracts. We already share services with Clutha a little bit, but we want to expand that relationship as well. Recycling rubbish, that's another one as well. There's 3 new MRFs to be proposed. Dunedin's is almost done, so why wouldn't you just have one rather than building 3 of them? So these are all conversations that we're having, but you've got to have the other partners willing to have that conversation as well, and I guess that's probably where we're struggling a little bit.
I just want to just explain, just around shared services, but we're obviously we're working with ICC in regards to looking in the future about our buildings. Most council buildings are knackered. Gore's got a nice new one though. Paying for that here anyway. But we'll use that somewhere along the line here. But the reality is we're working with ICC really well, trying to suss out what the future holds. We're both looking at buildings, but there are different opinions on other councils indicating doing their own thing. So we've obviously invited other councils to be involved, and so there is a willingness to get together and looking what the community wants us to be making, trying to get these efficiencies, and also the building side of things is looking to the future around amalgamation, creating something fit for purpose.
Damien?
Look, Jason, I'm thinking of buying the farm next door to you. and I want to put a large-scale pig operation on it. How long do you think is a reasonable time to get the consent for that?
Well, I do live in the country, and my next door neighbour is a dairy farmer, so I'm sorry, pigs are not going to compete with dairy for a start. And I think you're more intelligent than that, Damien, to be honest. But yeah, I absolutely get your question. How long should the consent take? It should be of reasonable time frame. Okay, yeah. It should, like, seriously, how long does it take to read a piece of paper?
And who should control it?
And who should control it? Okay, I mean, it's a consentable process, right? It's got to go through its practical steps. Under the RMA currently, this is why we need changes in the RMA, right? Because at the moment, that would take years, right? So I would say, given the land use change, depending on what it is, whether it's a sheep and beef farm or a dairy farm, you've got seasonal changes going on. So if you were to buy a dairy farm to change it to a pig farm, I would say the resource consent should be over and done with by the time that dairy season's finished.
Nope. Thanks, Damien. Right. We said we'd be finished at 3. It is 3 o'clock. And unless anyone's got absolutely one more pressing question, I'm more than happy to call it. So, Ben, really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming in. Very busy schedule. Jason, appreciate your forthrightness, as usual. Jeff, really appreciate it. And Jeremy, thanks so much. And Environment Southland for facilitating this discussion. So it is a really, really big issue. My final comment is, if you think you guys have got problems, try living on the West Coast. We've got 30,000 people. We've got 4 councils, 1 regional council and 3 district councils. We've got 1 council member for every 800 people. Hey, Damien.
Say Damien about that.
Oh, yeah, Damien. Why didn't you fix it? No, just kidding. Look, really appreciate you all coming. Great. Hot afternoon. The bar's just over there. But I'm sure people will continue this discussion. So thank you so much, and appreciate everyone for taking part.